listeners, welcome to another great podcast session. I'm Shivani Mukhyala. Did you all know that according to the PwC report, India's share in the global GDP is likely to rise from 2% to 13% by the end of 2050? Isn't that amazing? It is also expected to emerge as the third largest domestic banking sector as well. This means that the BFSI sector is going to open new job opportunities, but the hard reality is that the skills needed in tomorrow's world will be very different from those of today. So this is because of increasing digitalization, process automation, and technology-driven approaches. So because of this, there will be less branch-based relationships with customers, and there will be more digital interactions. So this situation is definitely going to create more job roles and opportunities that don't even exist today. So to bridge this gap, let's hear what Manipal Academy of BSFI is doing in the words of Robin Bomik, who is a Chief Business Officer at Manipal Global. So without any further delay, let's welcome our speaker for the day. Hi, Robin. How are you doing?
Shivani, hey, I'm well. How are you? And a very warm welcome and a hi to all of the listeners as well.
Pleasure to have you here on Analytics Insight podcast. So, first of all, could you tell our listeners what Manipal Academy is all about?
Of course. So, Manipal Academy have been partnering with the BFSI industry now for close to 13 years. And essentially, what we do with the BFSI industry is focused primarily around two things. One is we work with the talent supply onboarding for most of the banks in the country, and also quite a few of the large insurance companies. So to give you an example, in the last 13 odd years, we would have onboarded over 200,000 bankers in India alone. The second thing that we also do is we partner very closely with the BFSI industry in creating some of the new training areas and the new learning areas that are going to be extremely relevant going forward. You kind of inferred to some of that when you started, and I'm looking forward to talking more about that. But these are some of the new tech investments, some of the new tech areas that are becoming extremely prevalent and really deciding the future of jobs and the future of work that's going to happen in BFSI going forward.
Great. Happy to know about Manipal Academy and how it is actually working with the talent supply and as well as partnering with the BFSI sector. And now, could you tell our listeners what are its specializations and services that the Academy is actually offering by adding value to its clients?
Of course, Shivani. So I will talk about a couple of areas which are becoming extremely predominant for most of the financial services sector players going forward. The first is the area of data analytics and data science. And, this is essentially an area which is going to really define the future of how a bank or a financial institute operates going forward. And as a result of that, the kind of roles that this industry will demand will also fundamentally change. The second area, which is also impacting the BFSI segment in a very dramatic way, is the whole area of fintech. And we are currently partnering with most of the major banks and most of the major insurance companies in the country to build upon their fintech, talent footprint within these organizations. But really, the first one is something which we see to be almost revolutionary. It's no longer revolutionary. The whole space of big data and analytics within the banking space, especially, is completely swamping the need of future talent and also the way current employees work within each one of these organizations. So these are the two primary areas for us in terms of new initiatives that we are trying to drive within the BFSI space.
Great. And could you also tell us more, on the front, how it is actually adding value to your clients?
Of course. So let's talk about data analytics and big data to begin with. Now, I'll give you a small example, which a lot of your listeners might have experienced personally. With the whole digitalization that's been happening across, especially the payments area, most of us are now familiar with and extensively use, multiple forms of digital payments. So whether you're using Ola Money, or whether you're using Google Pay, or whether you're using Paytm, we are all familiar, and we are extremely, I would say, comfortable making various amounts of payment. The whole transition from using cash as a primary means of conducting business in the last 2 to 3 years, especially, the transition has really kind of turned into a wide-scale transformation, which I think most of us have lived through. So whether you're paying, 17 rupees or 18 rupees, to your local vegetable vendor for maybe a kilo of tomatoes, you no longer have to, take out a 100 rupee note and expect the person to give you change, and maybe, once upon a time, instead of change, they used to give candy, right? So that entire transformation that's happened in digital payments, if you look at it, is possibly one of the most mind-boggling transformations that has happened in this country. I think most of us remember the demonetization, 8th of November, when our Prime Minister announced it. A lot of us were taken aback, and most of us, frankly, were shocked that a country like India, which is predominantly a cash country, how are we going to transform and transition into something else? And what happens to all of those, the notes that we had grown to love? Yet, if you look at how, at least the current generation operates, I can tell you, I possibly used to go to the ATM at least 4 to 5 times in a month earlier. Now, I barely need to go to the ATM to withdraw cash once a month, and even most of the times that cash is sitting in my wallet. Interestingly, 3 or 4 years back, you could never leave your home without your wallet. Or your purse, right? Now, even if you leave home without a wallet, it doesn't really matter, because your entire payments ecosystem is there on your mobile phone. So I think this is one huge example of where a transformation has happened, especially in India. Today, we are actually making the most number of digital payments globally, even more than China. And that trend is going to continue to grow. And a lot of the disruption that's happening in the banking sector is actually going to reflect and follow on this change in, I would say, dramatic change in consumer behavior that's happened.
Thanks, Robin, for explaining it, with detailed examples that we all actually can relate to. Amazing. And as a business, chief business officer, you must be having very interesting roles and responsibilities, right? So can you tell us about it?
Yeah, Shivani, I can only tell you that, within my current remit of responsibility, it's only getting more and more exciting every day. And one of the reasons it's so exciting is because we are currently in a stage where it's almost impossible to predict the future. So while, a lot of us are paid to sit and do some crystal ball, gazing and figure out what is it that the consumer is going to be looking for 5 years down the line or 10 years down the line, most of the interesting and most of the path-breaking innovation that's happening within the banking and financial services industry is happening here and now. And I think we are only going to feel the repercussions and the impact of that way down the line. I mentioned fintech briefly earlier. We started the first fintech finishing school in the world with the Job Assured program last year. And interestingly, when we launched it, we had absolutely no clue whether that would scale or not. We partnered with one of the major banks in the country, that was Axis Bank, last year. And we thought, we will probably grow purely with Axis Bank. In the last 12 months, we've managed to successfully onboard another 6 major clients, including a couple of very large banks, and it's only growing progressively in terms of the kind of skilling needs that we see under the fintech program for Manipal. The other thing I'd like to also mention is that the kind of people that are looking to get into BFSI, the new generation or the younger generation of future employees, their expectations are also very different. So, as you know, Manipal has the DNA of education, and we've been working with learners and fresh learners in this country now for about 75 years and more. What we are seeing now, especially, is the rate of change and the ability to kind of go in with flexible learning outcomes is really what's driving most of the new age of learning, so to speak. So while we talk about customer experience, we talk about learning experience, etc. One of the most important features of any of what we do is, it has to be delivering an outcome. We work mostly in our Manipal Global. We work primarily with postgraduates, as in people who have, completed either an undergrad or a postgrad, and looking to get into employment, right? And a lot of times their first job. When you work with that segment of people, their requirements are very focused on outcomes. Their requirements are very agile. And essentially, they're looking for new and exciting roles that would kind of make sure that they are relevant within the industry for the foreseeable future. So one of the requirements of my job, and essentially what we do, is we are constantly reinventing, inventing new stuff, and trying to see how can we deliver, learning more from an outcomes perspective, make sure we are close to the industry. We have to be agile in the way we deliver it. Of course, COVID has meant that, physical workspaces have now become largely online and digital. So clearly, that's something which goes without saying. But most important is the ability to look at a learner as a lifelong learner, and not just someone who is coming into an institution, spending 3 months and 4 months, and then getting into a job and then disappearing forever. So the final thing that we are constantly working on and innovating on is how do we make sure that we are able to engage a learner over a period of, over a journey, and not just as an instance. And to do that, we have to keep content interesting. The engagement, the learning experience has to be fresh. It has to be intuitive. Of course, things like gamification, etc., are part of hygiene nowadays. And the ability for us to kind of be very specific in terms of what each of those learning modules or outcomes are. I think overall, Shivani, it's an interesting space to be in, and we are kind of, trying to be, challenging not only what we know, but also what the industry knows, in this space.
That really sounds interesting. Your words echo our, present scenario very lot. Especially, learner as a lifelong learner, seeing that perspective is actually very different, and it's mandatory to survive in this present scenario as well. So now when we look at the pandemic's hit, it has changed many things, right? Especially across industries. So how do you think that the pandemic has transformed the BFSI sector?
So Shivani, it's a great question in the sense that I think we will possibly find out maybe a year to year and a half down the line. The early signs that we see are primarily around 3 areas where the major impact seems to have happened. First is, the pandemic has kind of introduced new ways of working. Which means that the BFSI industry and possibly other industries as well are really looking at how the future workforce is going to look like, right? For example, do you need everybody in office? How many branches do you need? Does everybody need to report into a branch? What is the right coordination or the combination of a hybrid working model, etc. Second, that seems to have really transformed the way this industry works is for almost 1.5 years, people really didn't get an opportunity to spend money, right? We were all sitting at home. Some of us were fortunate enough to still have a job. But what that meant was, people were earning money and they really didn't get an opportunity to spend it. And if you look at most of the banks in the country, I mean, they're sitting on huge piles of cash. Now, cash, as you know, sitting in one place is completely useless. It needs to be in circulation. So pretty much every financial services organization out there are focusing on lending. I mean, whether it be lending money to you in the form of an automobile loan or a housing loan, or even selling you a credit card, people are trying to get you to spend, right? And which is why you see pretty much every alternate, advertisement out there, advertising a very competitive home loan and trying to sell you everything from, education loans and so on and so forth. I think the third area in which there's been a major impact is really the ability to understand and, direct customer behavior. And that kind of, very closely aligns with the school of data analytics and data science that we launched recently. I mentioned right at the beginning that, the future of banking and financial services will largely be guided by, an institution's ability to read data. Everybody has access to a lot of data. We are generating data constantly. Most of the organizations that we bank with are capturing some of the data. However, one of the reasons, you use Google Pay far more than maybe using your bank or a debit card or a credit card is possibly because of ease of use, right? So you can scan and pay, you get rewards. The entire user experience is so much better. Now, in this entire process, the person or the institution which gets to understand your behavior as a consumer is Google and not the bank. And that is something that most of the banks are worried about, because finally, if you keep your money with a large bank, but you choose not to transact with them, that doesn't help, right? Because finally, as a consumer, your data really gets generated when you are working or when you're transacting or when you're spending or when you're earning, etc. So really the focus on understanding consumer behavior, what is the next level of digital experience that we are looking for as a consumer? What are the new products that we could potentially be, interested in? What are the kind of micro services that could be relevant depending on the market? All of those things are fundamentally changing the way this industry is going to operate down the line. And in case some of you have heard of the concept of neobanks, for example, neobanks are now setting up shop in India. So you have the first one, I believe, was Revolut from the UK, which set up sometime earlier this year. But essentially, with neobanks, with an Amazon, with a Google, with a Paytm coming into play, the whole role of traditional banking services is going to be turned around on its head. And that, again, is possibly the biggest area of impact that we have seen in the last 1.5 years post-COVID. I think that's got accelerated at a pace which nobody would have imagined in 2019.
Great. And, very rightly pointed out all about, the three situations where the BFSI sector has been transforming. So now how necessary it is, to upskill professionals, as, today's skills might not be, valuable in tomorrow's. So especially when we look at India, So how necessary it is, to upskill the professionals in this particular sector?
I would not use the word necessary. I would use the word mandatory, Shivani. I think it's a life skill. And, when I say life skill, what I mean is that if you do not reskill yourself, you will probably find yourself redundant sooner rather than later. Now, let me kind of put this into context, maybe into BFSI, and of course, a similar rate of transformation is happening in a lot of other industries as well. But in banking, in insurance, I'll again give you a small example. Uh, a few years back, and maybe let's say a decade back, most of the banks used to hire for a role called probationary officers. And a probationary officer was a fairly, aspirational role to go for. You would be expected to sit in a nice office, maybe sit in the branch, meet customers who would walk into the branch and solve their problems. And sometimes if the customers would ask you for a product, you could explain that product to them and maybe sell them that product. Now, unfortunately, in the last few years, that role of probationary officer has completely transformed to a point where, I think most banks have realized that customers no longer walk into their branches. So you cannot have people sitting in a branch waiting for a customer to walk in and then you can sell them something. It has turned around to being a situation where you've got to be where the customer is, and the customer might be at a mall, the customer might be, at an automobile dealership, the customer might be obviously, in some physical office, or in most cases, the customer might be at home. So how do you reach out to a customer who is no longer walking into your branch, because you still need to sell them new products and new services? I think that's one of the fundamental changes that has occurred in the last decade. And as a result, a lot of people who used to think that walking into a bank and getting a job in a bank was, like you're set for life. And of course, there's a huge aspirational quotient. But most people would walk into and join a bank branch because, it's a nice, comfortable job, right? Unfortunately, those kind of roles have all been replaced by various degrees of automation. So if you are, of course, things like internet banking, etc., are the simpler examples. But even if you look at the impact that demonetization had, I mean, how many people actually walk into an ATM anymore, right? We spoke about the complete, revolution that's happened in the digital payment space. So naturally, you will need a very different kind of employee with a very different skill set to be relevant anymore within the banking and financial services space. I'll also give you an example of insurance. If you look at how traditionally an insurance company would be staffed, there would be roles right from sales to customer service to people who would actually be responsible for claims and assessing a claim and then claim settlement and then payments, etc. Now, a lot of those roles traditionally, which were done by people, are now all automated. So you have technologies such as RPA, which are responsible for automating over 60% of the traditional roles within an insurance sector. Now, fortunately, selling to a client or a potential client is still something which is done best by an individual, by a human, and not by a bot. Having said that, it's quite possible that even the future of selling might look very different. Some of the roles that really have been impacted because of this transformation, because of this change, are really, as I mentioned, some of the back office roles that used to be very prevalent earlier. Now, let me also put that into the context of the Indian banking sector. The Indian banking sector is still underpenetrated. There's still a lot of investment that's going on in terms of financial inclusion and getting people to come in and buy more products and maybe even do more fixed deposits, etc. But the core change that has happened in terms of the people that are getting hired and promoted and really being groomed within some of the larger organizations are people who can use technology, who can use data, who can use tools and processes to really differentiate the bank, the service that's being offered, and more importantly, understand what is it that the customer is likely to want 2 years or 3 years down the line. Most businesses are trying to figure out that let's try and be where the as they say, when you're playing hockey, you should be where the ball is likely to be and not where the ball was, right? So I think most of the roles that are being hired for across all levels, when I mentioned fintech, when I talked about data analytics and data sciences, really the future lies in the ability to understand consumer behavior and design products, build products that would be innovative, that are agile, that take away the middleman, and really maybe try and include the entire section of the population, not just a small part of it. And all of that needs tools. It needs access to technology. It needs access to understanding the domain. It needs access to understanding the compliance and regulatory needs, and a whole lot of things which might not have been as important or as critical even, I would say, 5 or 6 years back.
Very well explained, Robin. And, as you mentioned about technology as well, so it has been transforming across industries in many, many diverse ways. So how is the academy, contributing to the growth of artificial intelligence and big data analytics and, the cloud, even for that matter?
So, Shivani, what we do is we really have a approach which kind of encompasses 3 areas. The one is, there is the simplest part of all of this is the actual skilling that's done on a product or a tool or a technology, such as, let's say, you mentioned artificial intelligence and machine learning. So, for example, if I use an open source product like Python, I mean, training someone on Python is possibly the easiest part of it all, right? What are the other more relevant areas in which kind of we focus on in addition to the first one? The second critical area is knowing a product or a tool or a methodology is never good enough, because it's equally important to be productive and understand the role that you would be performing when you join your employer. Within Manipal Global, we have this principle of providing first day, first hour productive employees. What that means is that post a finishing school experience with Manipal, when the employee joins, the hiring organization, they are expected to be ready from the word go. The minute they the minute they join the company. Now that happens because they understand the product, the tool set, the technology, the methodology, etc., which was the first one. Second is they need to be trained equally for the role that they would be performing. So, for example, are you a business analyst? Are you a product manager? Are you maybe a developer? Are you someone who is more on the solution side? So someone who is actually responsible for building in multiple solutions, etc., right? The third and very critical area is understanding the domain. And as I had briefly mentioned, it's not good enough just to understand, for example, big data. You need to understand the impact of big data within banking, right? And that means that you should have a basic understanding of the banking sector in terms of maybe compliance requirements, rules, regulations, KYC, what can you do, what's the market trends, what other people are doing so that you are able to build maybe products and tools that are relevant to you. Last but not the least is really the whole area of, what's popularly called as soft skills, which is becoming extremely critical going forward. So one of the challenges and one of the reasons why most people coming out of a traditional university setup, do not find jobs, it's largely because they don't understand what the corporate wants, right? So when a corporate, employer is looking at hiring, there are very fundamental things like communication skills, the ability to write a structured email, the ability to demonstrate analytical thinking, for example. How do you approach problem solving, for example? How do you work with a team that you have never physically met, but you're just looking at them on a Zoom, 2x2 inch screen every day? Those kind of things often make or break an employee-employer relationship. So that's the fourth element on which we focus on, and that's again becoming extremely critical in an employee coming in and being successful and being able to actually produce results when they join the hiring organization. So really, these are the 3 or 4 areas that we try and focus on as Manipal.
Great, and happy to know how the academy is actually contributing to artificial intelligence or machine learning or even the big data analytics and data science. So especially when talking about the fintech companies, so blockchain technology has been taking over these days. So how do you think blockchain technologies can affect the banking sector in 2021?
So Shivani, I think blockchain is a hugely underrated technology that a lot of banks are currently experimenting with. But I really see this becoming a significant game changer in the next couple of years, maybe not in 2021, but potentially 2022 and later. There are a couple of scenarios within which blockchain has very obvious benefits. One of them is the ability to really have secure transactions without too many, let's say, brokers or middlemen, right? So as you would know, blockchain really is a whole concept of, ledgers that contain customer data, which has been verified, by a chain of, let's say, approvals and authorities, right? And some of those authorities could be an individual, right? So who can verify that it's actually a genuine transaction. Now, one of the biggest advantages of having blockchain-based technologies is the ability really to do peer-to-peer, I would say, validation and verification of customer data, customer transactions. And what that really means is 2 things. One is you no longer require a global authority or a mandate, or even a middleman, so to speak. If you look at some of the large credit card companies, and I could typically think of an Amex or a Visa or a MasterCard. One of the roles that they play as a global authority is really to provide you with access to a unified set of toolkit, which kind of lets you introduce your product, tells you how to go about acquiring customers, validating the customer, the transaction, etc. Now with blockchain, a lot of that gets democratized, right? And as you would know, the entire world is grappling with this concept of cryptocurrency. Maybe it's much more than a concept as we speak, but the entire crypto framework is built on blockchain. Now, one of the obvious advantages to that is the fact that, crypto can possibly, or digital currency can possibly, really democratize the value of currency going forward. So it could be a far more truthful reflection of the true value of currency, of an economy, etc. Now, of course, there are pros and cons, and the cons that typically most central governments and central banks are worried about is all around control, right? So how do you control, the various entities that are involved? How do you control transactions? How do you control, let's say, the gray economy or transactions that are really strictly not legit, right? So, but like any other powerful tool, I mean, everything has its pros and cons. I think crypto is clearly no different. But again, it's purely based on blockchain technology, and the ramifications of something like crypto can be far more than significant. I mean, the way the entire world benchmarks their currency against the US dollar, I mean, that fundamentally could change. So naturally, there's a lot of impact to that. There are positives, there are negatives, but definitely that's one of the areas in which we will see a lot of work going on, globally going forward.
Thanks for elaborating on how blockchain can actually transform the banking sector, Robin. And the pandemic has also accelerated the adoption of digitalization, and there are more technology-driven approaches now than ever before. So, how do you think we can replace the existing workforce if we are not skilled?
Shivani, I think it's less about replacing the workforce. It's more about upskilling them, because to be honest, India has over 1 million people who work in the BFSI sector alone. And I would safely assume that out of that million odd people, over 90% of them are not geared up for any of the new scale areas that would be transforming this sector going forward. So now the question really, I think most of the large institutions are struggling with is, how do we bring about transformation at scale? So one of the things that we try to say at Manipal is we are essentially the people part of the digital transformation that's happening, which means that, when we look at how to accelerate, adoption of these new skills, I think there are a couple of realities that we have to work with. First is, not everybody starts at the same level. So, when we talk about, let's say, deploying an enterprise-wide reskilling program, we have to be conscious of the fact that, maybe a bank with 100,000 employees would have widely different needs among those 100,000 people. The second thing that we need to work with in most cases is that, people by design or by nature are very, they don't want to change, right? They don't want to learn anything new. So, the question that constantly gets asked is, what's in it for me? I mean, why should I sit and learn, why artificial intelligence is important? What is machine learning? What is cognitive dissonance? Why do I care? What is big data? I mean, it doesn't matter to me. So I think building that business case and having a typical carrot and stick approach where some of it gets made mandatory by the employer, that's a second big challenge that pretty much everybody's grappling with. I think the third big challenge that's happened is there is this massive digital divide that has become a reality in most organizations, not just banks. So you have the new digital savvy, digital natives who are very comfortable, understanding, interpreting, working with new technology. And then, of course, you have a lot of other people who might have been there for many, many years, for whom, transforming to a new way of working is a severe challenge. And this digital divide is becoming a serious, friction point for most organizations to move forward at the speed at which they need to. And we are being called in more and more to come in and help them bridge this digital divide within these organizations. Last but not the least, it's really all about speed and agility. Now, one of the things while learning and continuous learning is becoming, hygiene, and it's something that none of us can live without. The way we all learn is pretty unique. Not everyone, maybe I'm a visual learner, maybe somebody else can just listen to a podcast such as this and learn something out of it. How do you design a system at scale for such individual levels and methods of learning? Along with the fact that, for any employer, you also need to be able to measure the outcomes and the progress that you make post that learning happening. So that is possibly a more severe challenge, which multiple companies, including Manipal, are trying to address. Everyone. So when we talk about ed tech, for example, I think the tech part is really what's trying to see whether we can integrate, human-centric technology combined with learning tools and learning platforms, and make it very intuitive and very, I would say, personalized towards the learner, so that they don't feel that they've got to finish something within a restricted space or a period of time. So I would say these are the 3 or 4 things that most organizations are kind of trying to solve, and we are playing a very active role in working with most of them in trying to solve for this.
This is very apt, for the present scenario, as the demand for skilled workers have been the foremost for most of the companies and industries. And this is really going to help most of the organizations, to upskill their employees as well. So thank you so much, Robin. It was really a pleasure talking to you and learning more about Manipal Academy, and waiting to see even more innovative solutions coming up from your end.
Thank you, Shivani, and it's been a pleasure talking to you.